In this recording, we'll discuss the cerebrum and the cerebellum. The cerebrum has several functions, one being motor functions. We have both voluntary conscious motor functions, and we have voluntary subconscious motor functions. Okay, so this is all voluntary, but some of it is conscious, some of it is subconscious. The voluntary conscious motor movements come from your frontal lobe, specifically in a region called your premotor cortex and your primary motor cortex. Okay. Your primary motor cortex can be found in your precentral gyrus. Okay. So let's talk about, that was a lot of words, right? Let's talk about all those words. Okay, so you know what a gyrus is, right? It's a wrinkle. Okay. This is going to be like a good sized wrinkle. Precentral, so before the central something. Okay. What is the central something that we're referring to? The central something is called your central sulcus. Okay. Now you know a sulcus is a groove or a valley. Okay. About halfway or a little more than halfway back. So remember, this is the front of the brain. Okay. A little bit more than halfway back. Boop. Okay. We come to the central sulcus. This is a pretty decent sized groove. Okay. So that is your central sulcus. So we are saying your precentral gyrus. So your precentral gyrus would be the big wrinkle, the big gyrus right in front of your central sulcus. And let me just go ahead and warn you, you also have a post-central gyrus. Okay, a big wrinkle right behind that central sulcus. That's also going to be a big deal. Okay, so your precentral and your postcentral gyri, these are going to come up a good bit. Okay, so you really need to kind of keep these straight. It's like, what are we talking about? Precentral, postcentral, what? Remember, there's a dividing line. It's the central sulcus. We have a gyrus right in front and right behind. So for right now, when we're talking about conscious, coordinated, voluntary movements, we're talking about your precentral gyrus. Again, premotor cortex, primary motor cortex, so motor movement. Okay, now, if you break this part of your brain, you cannot move. Just period. End of story. Just like you can't move. Okay. This is where all of your voluntary conscious movements originate from. Your brain is like, ooh, let's pick up this pencil. That signal is coming from this area. So if you damage the area, guess what? You ain't picking up a pencil. Okay. So forth and so on. All right. Now, you have subconscious voluntary motor movements. And the best example is you swing your arms when you walk to help with your balance. Okay? Nobody really thinks about swinging their arms. Okay? You just do it, subconscious. This comes from a different region in your brain. Okay? This actually comes from deeper in the brain, the basal nuclei, and we mentioned those previously. You might hear them referred to as basal ganglia. These terms are fairly interchangeable. Okay? This is gray matter deep in the cerebrum. Okay? Now, if you damage this region, perhaps you suffer from Parkinson's or Huntington's. Okay? Then you will still be able to move, but you will not have nice coordinated movements. Okay? And if you damage enough things, you could lose some motor function entirely. All right. Now, what else we got? So, how do we get voluntary movement to actually happen? Okay, so let's talk about it. We are going to start in your brain. Okay, that's central. That's cerebral cortex. Okay, we've got some different regions within that primary motor cortex, that premotor cortex of your precentral gyrus. Okay, you can see what we're moving. This is kind of a weird looking picture, but here you go. If you want to move your hand, this is where it comes from. Okay, so we are going to send signals from your brain. We're going to go all the way down. We're going to go out to the skeletal muscles because you already know, how do we move our hand? Oh, we need skeletal muscles. How do we move our feet? Oh, we need skeletal muscles. Okay, so we're going to go from your brain all the way down your spinal cord, out to your skeletal muscles. Okay, Now, let's go into a little bit more detail. Okay? These signals that are coming from your brain, they're going down your spinal cord. Okay? These neurons specifically are called upper motor neurons. They're in the upper portion of your body. Okay? These go down a descending tract. Okay? Now, you happen to already know descending means down. Coincidentally, these signals are going down your spinal cord. Okay? We have some options depending on what you're trying to move. If you are trying to move your body, you are going to go down a cortical spinal tract. Okay? You're going to go down your spinal cord. Okay? If instead you're going to go down, instead if you want to move your head or neck region, you are just going to use a different tract. You're going to use a corticobulbar tract instead. Okay? And so here we've got the corticobulbar. Go a little bit down your spinal cord, but we quickly go out to the skeletal muscles of your head and neck region. Okay. Now, we're about to add more words, y'all. All right, so stick with me. If the signal decussates, which is really fancy science speak for cross, okay? If the signal decussates, if it crosses, we call this contralateral control. Now, you might not be familiar with these terms. Decussate might be a new word for you. Contralateral might be a new word for you. But a lot of people are familiar with the idea that your left brain controls the right side of your body and the right brain controls the left side of your body. Okay, so a lot of people are at least familiar with that idea. So we're just throwing fancy science words in. Okay, if your left brain controls your right body, then those signals have decussated, they've crossed over, and this is contralateral. Okay, so kind of opposite sides. Okay. Now, not every signal decussates. Okay, if it doesn't, we call it ipsilateral control, or same side. So a lot of these little red lines, these are your neurons, okay, sending signals. And you can see a lot of these signals are going to cross over. But look, this one little guy does not, okay, or at least not yet, okay. He does finally cross over, but not always. Like this guy could have gone out that way, okay. Now, you'll notice that if we trace this, let's just keep on going. Okay, so eventually we're going to have to synapse. Oof, here we are. Finally, way down here. It took us forever, right? All this red, okay, all of this red, these are all motor neurons. These are our upper motor neurons, okay? These have to synapse with a lower motor neuron, which is our white one down here, okay? This white one, this lower motor neuron, takes the signal all the way to the skeletal muscle. So we only have two neurons here. We have an upper and a lower motor neuron, okay? Now, again, I know that's a lot of new words, kind of a lot of ideas. Don't be afraid to kind of pause, go back, re-listen, really just kind of make sure you understand what's going on, because a lot of these terms are going to come up again and again. All right, other functions of the cerebrum. We have sensory functions happening as well. So we just chatted about motor functions, but your cerebrum also does sensory. Okay? We are going to talk about both somatic sensory areas and somatic sensory association areas. Okay? These are going to receive and interpret signals coming from your quote-unquote your senses, your skin, your joints, muscles, touch, pressure, pain, vibration, taste, temperature. Whew. Okay? All that kind of good stuff that you're already familiar with. This is where we're going to receive those signals and really process that information. Okay? So the first one, okay, somatic sensory area specifically, and your somatosensory association area specifically, which is all this is hard to say. I feel like I'm jumbling my words. My apologies. Okay? These are located in your parietal lobe, specifically in your post-central gyrus. So I did warn you that we were going to have a post-central gyrus as well. So here it is. Remember that we got that big dividing line, that central sulcus. Our red highlighted region was your precentral, which contains your primary motor. So this is where movement comes from. Right behind it, your post-central gyrus. This is your primary sensory region, okay? And your somatic sensory association region. Okay? This is where you sense things, okay, for your body, okay? So again, skin, joints, muscles, touch, all that kind of stuff, okay? Now, if you break your primary somatic sensory area, you cannot feel touch. So somebody could be poking you and just trying to bug the mess out of you. Can't feel it. Okay? Which, you know, if somebody's trying to bug the mess out of you, you might not mind that you can't feel it. On the rest of the minutes in your life, you're probably going to wish you could feel things. Especially, for example, if we were touching things that were dangerous. So, for example, a hot stove. Okay? If you couldn't tell, if you couldn't quote unquote feel, okay, the stove was hot, okay, then that's going to be a problem. And then we have the somatic sensory association area. If you damage this, you are unable to make sense of what is being felt. Okay, so the sensory area, the primary sensory area, you just can't really feel anything. If you damage the association area, you can't really make sense of what is being felt. Okay. Now, where are we going? All right, here we go. Next, visual areas. Okay, so again, you've got a visual cortex or primary visual area, and you have a visual association area. Okay, and these are almost always like right next to each other, basically. So you got your visual cortex or primary visual area right back here, and right next door is the association area. Okay, this will not shock you. You're gonna receive and interpret visual information here in your visual cortex, y'all. Okay, in your visual association area. We find this in the occipital lobe. Okay. If you damage the primary visual area, okay, and this just calls it the visual cortex, same thing. If you damage this area, you are blind. Okay. Your eyeballs work just fine, but your brain's like, nah, I'm just kidding. Blind. Okay. If instead you damage your visual association area, you are unable to identify what you see. Okay. Now, your auditory areas. Again, you've got an auditory association area and auditory cortex or primary auditory area. Okay. These receive and interpret information regarding sound. This is in your temporal lobe. Okay. If you damage your auditory cortex or your primary auditory area, you will be deaf. Okay. So again, ears work just fine. Nope, just kidding, deaf. Okay. Can't hear anything. If instead you damage your auditory association area, you are unable to identify sounds, including voices. Okay. So hopefully, by now, you have picked up on something. Okay. If you damage one of these primary areas, okay, again, sometimes they're called cortexes, auditory cortex, visual cortex. If you damage these areas, you have completely lost a sense. Okay, one of your senses just does not work anymore. If instead you damage the association area, you are just unable to interpret the sensory information. It just doesn't make sense to you anymore. Okay. All right, smell or your olfactory cortex. This is also located in your temporal lobe. Okay. We don't really have an association area to speak of for our purposes here. If you damage your olfactory cortex, you cannot smell all the smells. Sometimes that's a good thing because there are stinky things out there, but that also means you can't smell all the good things either. Okay. Now, taste or gustatory cortex. Okay. This is in your insula. Look, y'all, we finally found your insula. You can see that these forceps are kind of retracting the superficial region of your cerebrum. So you can see the inner insula. There it is, way down there inside. If you damage your gustatory cortex, you can't taste things. Which again, some things don't taste very good, but a lot of things do.